Welcome to Christ Church of Fort Thomas, Kentucky. We are a congregation of the United Church of Christ, and our congregation's guiding statement is that we embrace all as we journey the way of Jesus. So wherever you are in your life journey or your faith journey, we embrace you and we welcome you, and we're grateful you're sharing this time with us today. We are continuing our Improv'Ing in the Spirit, as we been calling it this month, of just kind of playing with what the Spirit stirs up around scripture passages that people have shared in the congregation. And so what follows from this is what we did in worship today, is we looked at 4 different passages. So we'll share that in just a moment. I do want to remind you that if you are in the Fort Thomas area, we have our God Goes Green nights each Tuesday night. Our next one, of course, is this Tuesday. We have dinner at 5:30, and then we have some things for adults and for kids starting around 6:30. So would love to have you there if you're in the area. A week from yesterday, so it's Saturday, June 22nd, part of what we're doing with God Goes Green is that we are going to be setting up a community electronics recycling event with an organization called Reboot Recyclers. And so on Saturday, June 22nd, from 9 a.m. until 12, we'll have a dumpster out in the church parking lot, and folks from Reboot who will be here to collect electronics and take them away to be responsibly reused or recycled. So another way that we, as a congregation that is a creation justice congregation, are working to help how we are caring for this beautiful creation that we have. So that is coming up on the 22nd. I'm sure there's other things, but we'll just stop it at that point. And so I'll shift it over into what we shared in worship this morning. So grace, peace, love, and joy be with you today and every day. So for those who may be new with us today, or haven't been here for a few weeks, we are doing something a little bit different throughout the month of June, where we are just kind of trusting in how the Spirit leads as we dig into some scripture passages that you all have submitted over the last several weeks. So some of them may have been like favorite passages, ones that have been deeply meaningful to you in your life, and some of them are ones that maybe you've heard before and gone, what is that all about? And so we've had quite a spread over the last 2 Sundays of those different kinds of passages. And so we're just literally drawing ones out and seeing what the Spirit speaks. And so we're going to do that. We've been doing about 3 of them a Sunday. We'll see how many we get through here. And there's actually way more in here, I think, than we're going to be able to get through this week and next. So maybe I'll do something where I send some responses out for some of the ones we don't get to here in worship. So let's dig here to the bottom. Okay. All right. Okay. I think this one says Romans 8:28. Okay. So this it's one of those places where we want to we're reading like one verse, but it's all a part of a larger thing that Paul is doing in his letter to the Romans. So we have to remember these letters that we get, Romans, 1 Corinthians, Philippians, so forth, they are just letters written from one guy to a community of believers or to an individual, responding to specific things going on in the life of that community of faith. And so just like when you get a letter from somebody, you don't just look at that one line and just take that and forget the rest. So we have a bit of a challenge whenever we do that, and we pull one verse out. And so we're going to share this verse, but also let's look at a little bit of what's around it. So verse 8, Romans 8, verse 28 says, "We know that all things work together for good, for those who love God and who are called according to His purpose." Now this comes at the end of a lengthy thing where Paul talks about the challenges and the sufferings and the trials that sometimes come in life. So if you go a few verses back, Paul writes this: "I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory about to be revealed to us." A few verses later, "We know that the whole creation has been groaning together as it suffers together the pains of labor And not only the creation, but we ourselves, who have the first fruits of the Spirit, we groan inwardly while we wait for adoption, the redemption of our bodies, for in hope we were saved. Likewise, the Spirit helps us in our weakness, for we do not know how to pray as we ought, but the very Spirit intercedes with groanings too deep for words. So there's more verses around that we could look at, but this verse 8:28 about all things work together for good for those who love God and are called according to God's purpose is a part of this larger thing where Paul is talking about trials and sufferings. And that is a question that, frankly, I think all of us, if we're honest with ourselves, have wrestled with. Why do trials come into life? Why does something bad happen to somebody who is deeply faithful? If you've never asked that question, I'm going to push you a little bit here to say you've got to dig a little deeper in your life. Because that question has to be there. And frankly, that question is present throughout the Psalms. In the Psalms, you have many of these songs where whoever wrote a certain psalm, whether it was David or somebody else, these messages saying, God, where are you as my enemies are surrounding me? God, where are you as my body is wasting away? God, where are you? And here's the thing about this verse, is I believe it is absolutely true. I do. But I believe it is often the very worst thing you can say to a person. Somebody has just suffered a tragedy in their life. And you come up to them, I'm going to use you as an example. You've just had something come in your life, and I come up to you and I say, God works through all things. And this happened because God has a plan. How's that going to feel? If you've just suffered a tragedy, thank you. If you've just suffered some kind of tragedy in your life, and it's almost this message of like, God caused it, because God's going to do some kind of great thing through this tragic circumstance. There may be truth to it, but that may be the very worst thing you can say to a person at that moment. Because they need somebody who is just simply going to be with them in their grief and meet them in that place. And maybe there will come a time that you can dig into this kind of teaching, this kind of message, where you can look back and you can see a path of what God has done from that moment to something else. I have a dear friend of mine named Jeff Town. Jeff was one of my seminary classmates, and was part of my pastor's group that I meet with once a year. In 2008, Jeff and his wife Karen's son Ben was diagnosed with a very rare form of brain cancer at about 18 months old. And he fought, and they fought for about a year, and Ben died. And in the years that followed, Jeff and Karen dedicated themselves to trying to find funds to research this cancer that had very little money going to it. And through their efforts, Seattle Children's Hospital began what is now known as the Bentown Cancer Center for Children. And through their research, they found stem cell treatments and other things like that that have begun to have promising results for kids who had cancer similar to Ben. And there are kids who are alive today because of that research. But if you ask Karen or Jeff, would you want that to happen, or do you want Ben back? What do you think they'd say? They would want Ben, their son, back. And so, yes, God worked through that moment, through that awful tragedy. An amazing thing has taken place and continues to take place.
And so that's the way I take this passage, is that what God can do is God can do something through the tragic circumstances that happen in life. But that doesn't mean that's the thing that we drop on people when that moment happens. And so I'd love to say that that solves the question of why do bad things happen. It doesn't. There's a lot of holes even in what I just said. But that's at least what stirs for me with that. So whoever wrote that one, I hope that spoke to you in why you shared that. So let's move to, I love this. This one I'm just going to do really quickly. Another passage from Paul's letters, Philippians 4, verse 13. I want to offer this up. It's almost like a mantra. Paul says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. What's gone before this is the end of Paul's letter. He's talking about thanksgivings for all the things that the Philippian church has done for him, and also some of the trials that he's faced. And Paul makes this statement, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I use this often in my life as a mantra, especially in the times when things are really, really hard. A reminder that, that next step is, okay, I can take this step through Christ who strengthens me. And I can take this next step through Christ who strengthens me. That it is that thing that sometimes you got to just keep saying something for you really to believe it and feel it deep within yourself. I got really mad about this verse years ago. I was on a backpacking trip in college, and it was my first time doing this full-on multi-day. It was about a 5-day long backpacking trip, and I was not in any way ready to do that trip. First day of the trip, I was near the front as we got started. About 4, 5, 6 hours later, I was at the back. My legs were hurting, my back was hurting, my shoulder was hurting. I was like, this is terrible. How am I going to make it through this? And we were with a Christian backpacking company, and one of the guides, his name was Tim, is behind me and another guy who was really struggling. And Tim's quoting this verse over and over. Guys, you can do all things through Christ who strengthens you. You can do all things through Christ who strengthens you. You want to know what my response was? Shut up, Tim. I didn't want to hear it at that moment. But you know what? Tim was right. I needed that other person to be making that encouragement. Yeah, this is hard, but you know what? God's got you. God's got you. So ties in a bit with what we just talked about struggles and challenges that come in life, right? Maybe that thing in those moments, if you're in a moment like that right now, then maybe you just need to have that verse and in your quiver that you just pull that out. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. All right. Okay, I'm going to put this one back because I want to do something outside of Paul's letters, because apparently we got a lot of stuff that people are wrestling with about Paul's letters. But Matthew 19, verse 14. Let's pull this one up here. So 19, verse 14. Jesus said, actually I'm going to go back to verse 13. Then children were being brought to Jesus in order that he might lay his hands on them and pray. The disciples spoke sternly to those who brought them. But Jesus said, let the children come to me, and do not stop them, for it is to such as these that the kingdom of heaven belongs. And he laid his hands on them, and he went on his way. I don't know that there's much, at least for me, that kind of stands out of why we would want children. I mean, obviously, we want children to be a part of the community of faith. And sometimes we make it where we want children and young families because, we need to grow. We need to get those young families here in the pews and so forth, right? But here's what I'll say with that. is what I want to do with children in the life of the community of faith, whether it's here or any other community of faith, is that they're not just the future of the church, they're the present of the church. Just because a kid is 3 years old and rowdy and wiggly and loud doesn't mean they're not a part of the church. They're a part of this community of faith. Just as much as somebody who's 95 years old is a part of this community of faith. I think sometimes we make these statements about people and ages within the life of the church and say, well, someone's the future of the church and someone's the past of the church. And what Jesus shows over and over again is no, it doesn't matter who they are, it doesn't matter their age, you are all a part of this thing that I'm doing. Whether you're 3 years old, whether you're 13 years old, whether you're 33, whether you're 93, or anywhere in between, or older or younger than that. So, I would say with this, this is about what's stirring with me. As we're talking about children, listen to your children. Listen to your grandchildren. Listen to what it is they are dealing with in the world today. Listen to the fact that they're growing up in a very different world than really most any of us who are here right now. And see what God is saying through the voices. Whether it's a 5-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 15-year-old, a 20-year-old. And what does that say for us about how we structure and live out our lives and our faith? The disciples in this passage were like, we don't want to hear from them. And Jesus is like, no, I want them right here with me. So whether the kids are going to be up here in a few minutes or whether they're the grandkids of yours that you're like, I wish they would be in church, talk to them. Ask them. What's there in their lives? What does that say for us in our witness and our ministry? All right, I'm going to do one more. I'm just going to pull one more out here. Oh, Philippians 4:13. We just did that. Okay. Psalm 46, verse 10. This kind of happened last week. The last one we pulled out kind of served as a bit of a benediction and a blessing. This one does the same. Psalm 46, be still and know that I am God. I am exalted among the nations. I am exalted in the earth. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge. I'm going to just read the whole of that psalm that ends with those words and let that be this blessing, because I think this psalm speaks to a lot of these things, questions, unknowns, challenges, difficulties, struggles, trials in life. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear. Though the earth should change, and though the mountains shake in the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, though the mountains tremble with tumult, there is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy habitation of the Most High. God is in the midst of the city. It shall not be moved. God will help it when the morning dawns. The nations are in an uproar. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? The kingdoms totter. God utters his voice and the earth melts. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob, our refuge. Come, behold the works of the Lord. See what wonders God has brought on the earth. He makes wars cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear and burns the shields with fire. Be still and know that I am God. I am exalted among the nations. I am exalted in the earth. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge. Be still and know all this. Amen.